The great hall of Valdrin had never held so many wolves. Alawen pressed herself deeper into the shadows of the eastern colonnade, her heart slamming against her ribs as she watched the ceremony unfold below. Thousands of candles blazed from iron chandeliers, casting dancing light across the faces of pack leaders, nobles, and commoners who had traveled from every corner of the realm to witness this moment. The choosing. She should not have come. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to return to the small chamber in the servants' quarters where she had hidden for 3 days, waiting for Theron to send word. But he had sent nothing. No message, no explanation, only silence, and so she had come to see for herself. The Alpha King stood on the raised dais at the far end of the hall, his broad shoulders rigid beneath ceremonial black and silver. Even from this distance, Eloin could see the sharp cut of his jaw, the dark hair that fell across his forehead, the powerful stance that made lesser wolves bow their heads in instinctive submission. For 6 months, she had known another side of him, the man who whispered her name like a prayer in the darkness of the forest, the man whose hands trembled when he touched her face, the man who had pressed his lips to the mark on her hip, the secret claiming bite he had given her the night he swore she was his fated mate. When the council's demands are satisfied, he had promised, his breath warm against her skin, I will announce you to the world. You will be my queen, Eloin. Nothing will change that. She had believed him. Her hand moved instinctively to her lower belly, where a different secret grew. A secret she had planned to tell him tonight, after the ceremony, when he came to her as he always did. The candidates will now approach, the High Elder announced, his ancient voice carrying across the hushed hall. Alawen's nails bit into her palms as 5 women in flowing white gowns ascended the dais steps. Daughters of the most powerful bloodlines in Valdrin, each one beautiful, each one trained from birth for this possibility. And at their center, with hair like spun moonlight and eyes the color of frozen lakes, walked Lizera of House Vanthorn. The crowd murmured with approval. The Vanthorns controlled the northern territories, commanded 3,000 warriors, and had been positioning their daughter for this moment for years. Alawen watched Theron's face for any sign of the man she knew. Any flicker of warmth, of recognition, of the love he had sworn was eternal. His expression was carved from stone. Theron, Alpha King of Valdrin, blood of the first wolves, the High Elder intoned. You have heard the Council's counsel. You have reviewed the treaties and alliances. The realm awaits your choice. The silence stretched like a blade. Alawen stopped breathing. Her mark burned beneath her dress, a phantom heat that pulsed with every beat of her heart. Surely he could feel it too. Surely he would turn, would find her in the crowd, would declare that his choice had already been made in secret moonlit clearings where 2 souls had recognized each other as mates. Theron stepped forward. His movement was strange, Eloin realized. Mechanical. His gait lacked the fluid grace she knew so intimately. And his eyes, those amber eyes that had blazed with passion when he looked at her, seemed flat, distant, empty. I choose, his voice rang out, hollow as a tomb, Lysara of House Vanthorn. The hall erupted. Cheers and howls of celebration shook the ancient stones. Nobles embraced. Warriors stamped their feet in approval. The political alliance that would strengthen Valdrin's borders for generations had been secured, and Eloin felt something inside her shatter. The mark on her hip flared with sudden, searing pain. She gasped, doubling over in the shadows, her hand flying to the spot where his teeth had once claimed her flesh. It burned as if his bite was being torn from her body. Through tear-blurred vision, she watched Theron take Lysara's hand, watched him raise it to his lips in the traditional gesture of acceptance. Watched the woman smile with triumph, while the man Eloin loved showed nothing at all. He did not look for her. He did not hesitate. He did not seem to remember she existed. A sob tore from Eowyn's throat, lost in the cacophony of celebration. She stumbled backward, desperate to escape before the grief crushed her completely. Her shoulder struck a pillar, her ankle twisted on the uneven stones, but she kept moving, kept running, kept fleeing from the moment her entire world collapsed. The servants' corridors were empty, everyone having gone to witness the ceremony. Eowyn ran through them blind, one hand pressed to her mark, the other wrapped protectively around her belly. The child, his child, growing inside her while he chose another. She would not stay to watch him wed Lysara, would not remain in the castle where she had given him everything, where she had believed his promises, where she had been fool enough to think a nobody with healing magic could ever truly hold the heart of a king. Eowyn reached her tiny chamber and began to pack with shaking hands. A few dresses, her grandmother's pendant, the herbs she had gathered for the morning sickness that plagued her. She paused at the window, looking out at the celebration bonfires being lit across the capital. Somewhere in that great hall, Theron was accepting congratulations for his wise choice. Lysara was probably already planning their wedding, and no one, not a single soul, knew that the Alpha King's true mate was disappearing into the night with his heir growing in her womb. Eowyn pressed a kiss to her fingertips, then touched them to the frosted glass. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered to the darkness. "May you find the happiness you chose over me." Then she pulled her cloak tight around her shoulders and vanished through the servants' gate, swallowed by the winter night. She did not see the figure watching from the tower above. She did not see the amber eyes that flickered with sudden desperate awareness, and she did not hear the howl of anguish that split the sky moments later. A sound so raw and broken that wolves across the kingdom lifted their heads in shared grief. By the time Theron reached her empty chamber, Eowyn was already gone. 3 months later, the village of Thornwick had almost forgotten it had a newcomer. Eowyn had arrived in the dead of winter, a young widow, she claimed, seeking refuge from grief. The village elders had taken pity on her swollen belly and haunted eyes, offering her the abandoned cottage at the edge of the forest in exchange for her healing skills. She had accepted without hesitation. Now spring was attempting to break through the last gasps of frost, and Eowyn had become simply the healer woman who lived by the woods. She delivered babies. She set broken bones. She brewed teas for coughs and poultices for wounds. And every night, she lay awake with her hands on her growing belly, feeling the child kick against her palms. Sometimes the movements came from opposite sides at once, as if 2 tiny feet were pushing in different directions. The village midwife had commented on her size, suggesting she might be carrying more than one blessing. Eowyn tried not to think about what that might mean. "You are strong," she whispered in the darkness, "strong like your father." The thought of Theron still sent pain lancing through her chest. 3 months, and the wound had not begun to heal. If anything, it had festered, growing more agonizing with each passing day. The mark on her hip had never stopped burning. Eowyn had examined it countless times, watching in confusion as the scar tissue seemed to darken rather than fade. Among wolf-kind, rejection was supposed to sever the bond completely. The mark should have disappeared within weeks, leaving only smooth skin and bitter memories. Instead, it pulsed with heat that kept her awake. It ached when the wind blew from the east, from the direction of Valdrin. And sometimes, late at night, she could swear she felt something through it. A presence, a searching, a desperate, clawing need. But that was impossible. Theron had chosen another. The bond between them should have dissolved the moment he made that choice. Unless the bond had never been one-sided at all. Eowyn pushed the thought away. False hope was a poison more dangerous than any she knew how to brew. "Mistress Wren?" The voice at her door belonged to young Calla, the blacksmith's daughter, using the false name Eowyn had given when she arrived. She set down her mortar and pestle, wiping her hands on her apron before answering. "What is it, child?" Calla's face was pale with excitement and fear. "Traders have come from the capital. They bring news." Elowen's heart seized. "What news?" "The Alpha King," Calla breathed. "They say he has gone mad." The world tilted beneath Elowen's feet. She gripped the doorframe to steady herself. "Mad?" she managed. Calla nodded vigorously. "The traders say he has torn apart half the kingdom searching for someone, a woman. No one knows who she is, only that the king will destroy anything that stands between him and finding her." Elowen's hand moved to her belly. The baby kicked sharply, as if responding to the mention of its father. "They say the crops are failing in the eastern provinces," Calla continued breathlessly. "The wolves have grown feral, attacking livestock even in daylight. The king's own guard has been deployed to villages as far as the southern border, questioning everyone, searching every house." "Searching for what?" Elowen whispered. "For her. Whoever she is, she must have done something terrible. The traders say the king has offered a reward of 10,000 gold pieces for any information leading to her discovery." 10,000 gold. A fortune beyond imagining. Elowen forced her expression to remain neutral. "The affairs of kings are not our concern. Thank your father for the news." But after Calla had gone, Elowen sank into her chair with shaking legs. He was searching for her. Why would Theron search for a woman he had publicly rejected? Why would he tear his kingdom apart for a lover he had discarded without a second glance? Unless something had been wrong that night? Unless the cold emptiness in his eyes had been something other than indifference? Movement at the tree line caught her attention. Elowen's breath stopped. A shape stood between the ancient oaks, large, four-legged, silver-gray fur catching the last light of day. A wolf. As she watched, frozen with terror, another emerged beside it, then another. 5 massive wolves, their amber eyes fixed on her cottage with an intelligence that was anything but animal. They had found her. The mark on Elowen's hip exploded with heat. She gasped, stumbling away from the window as pain radiated through her body. This was nothing like the dull burn she had grown accustomed to. This was searing, overwhelming, as if molten iron had been pressed against her flesh. And beneath the pain, she felt something else. A presence, massive and desperate, pushing against the edges of her consciousness. Her baby kicked violently, movements coming from multiple directions at once. "No," Elowen breathed, both hands flying to her belly. "No, no, no." He was close, not just his wolves. Him. Elowen's eyes darted around her small cottage, calculating escape routes. The back door led to the forest, but if his wolves were already watching, they would run her down before she made it 100 yards. The root cellar was hidden, but a wolf's nose would find her within minutes. She was trapped. The front door shuddered beneath a heavy knock. Elowen's heart stopped. The wolves she had seen were in their animal forms. They could not knock on doors, which meant someone in human form stood on her threshold. Another knock, more insistent. "Mistress Wren?" A male voice, unfamiliar. "Please open the door. We mean you no harm." Elowen laughed bitterly at that. Wolves who hunted a pregnant woman through 3 kingdoms meant her no harm. How reassuring. But she had no choice. Running was impossible. Hiding was futile. And if she did not open the door willingly, they would simply break it down. She grabbed the iron poker from beside her hearth and moved toward the door. When she opened it, 3 men stood on her threshold. 2 were clearly warriors, their massive frames and alert postures marking them as the Alpha King's guard. But it was the 3rd man who drew Elowen's attention. He was older, his dark hair shot through with silver, his face weathered by decades of service. And his eyes, a deep amber that seemed to see straight through her, held something that looked almost like relief. "My lady," he said, and the title made Elowen flinch. "I am Brennan, first beta to the Alpha King. We have been searching for you for a very long time. I think you have made a mistake, Elowen said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. My name is Wren. I am a simple healer. Brennan's expression shifted to something like sympathy. You are Elowen, daughter of no house, formerly a servant in the royal castle. You bear the king's claiming mark on your left hip and his child in your womb. The poker trembled in Elowen's grip. How do you know about the mark? Because the king has described it in detail to every wolf in the realm. Because he has not slept in 3 months. Because he is tearing apart everything he built to find the mate who vanished without a trace. Brennan paused. May we come in? Elowen wanted to refuse, but her legs were shaking, her mark was burning, and the baby had finally stilled as if listening. She stepped aside. Brennan entered alone, leaving the guards at the door. He looked around her modest cottage, taking in the drying herbs, the simple furniture, the narrow bed where she had spent countless nights crying into her pillow. He did not choose her, Brennan said quietly. Lysara, I mean. He did not choose her willingly. Elowen's knees nearly buckled. What? The night of the choosing, someone slipped a compound into the king's wine. Something derived from wolfsbane mixed with other herbs we still have not identified. It suppressed his wolf, severed his connection to his instincts and his bond. That is impossible, Elowen whispered. We thought so too, until the effects wore off 3 days later and the king woke screaming your name. Brennan's voice hardened. He remembered nothing of the ceremony, nothing of choosing Lysara. The first thing he did was run to find you, and when your chamber was empty, he did not need to finish. Elowen sank into the nearest chair, her mind reeling. Drugged. He had been drugged. The empty eyes, the mechanical movements, the complete absence of recognition. It had not been rejection at all. It had been violation. Who did this? She demanded. We believe House Vanthorn, though we cannot yet prove it. Lysara's family has wanted their bloodline on the throne for generations. With you gone and the king bound to their daughter by witnessed oath, they would have everything they desired. Brennan knelt before her chair. My lady, the king is not well. The severed bond, the missing mate. His wolf has been fighting for dominance since the moment he regained his senses. If he does not find you soon, we fear he may go feral permanently. A wolf separated from its true mate for too long could lose itself entirely to the animal, never to return. And an alpha, with power as vast as Theron's, would become something monstrous. I cannot go back, she heard herself say. Lysara, the Vanthorns, they will kill me. They will kill my child. Which is why I have not told the king exactly where you are. Brennan withdrew a folded letter from his coat. This arrived at the castle 3 weeks ago. Elowen took the paper with numb fingers. The seal was broken, but she could see the Vanthorn crest pressed into the dark wax. The message inside was brief. The false mate has been located. The problem will be eliminated before the next full moon. Long live Queen Lysara. Elowen's blood turned to ice. Assassins, she breathed. Brennan nodded grimly. We intercepted this by chance. We do not know how many have been sent or how close they are. My lady, Theron will find you with or without my help. The bond is guiding him. Every day, he gets closer. As if to emphasize his words, Elowen's mark flared with heat again. He feels that too, the beta said quietly. Every time your mark burns, he feels an answering fire. It is the only thing keeping him sane. Before Brennan could say more, a howl split the evening air. It came from the forest, close and filled with warning. The beta was on his feet instantly. They have found us. Who? Elowen demanded, rising despite her trembling legs. Through her window she could see shapes moving between the trees. Not the silver-gray wolves who had watched her cottage earlier. These were different, darker, their movements coordinated with predatory precision. And leading them, Stepping from the shadows with a crossbow raised was a figure in black, whose face was hidden behind a wolf skull mask. The Vanthorn assassins had arrived. The first arrow shattered Elowen's window before she could draw breath to scream. Brennan moved with supernatural speed, shoving her toward the back of the cottage as glass exploded across the floor. The two guards burst through the front door, already shifting mid-stride, their human forms dissolving into massive wolves that lunged toward the tree line. "The cellar!" Brennan commanded. "Now!" "There is no way out from the cellar," Elowen gasped. "You only need to survive until reinforcements arrive." Another arrow punched through the wooden wall, embedding itself inches from Elowen's head. She could see the dark liquid glistening on its tip. Poison. "They are not trying to capture me," she realized aloud. "They are trying to kill me quickly." Brennan's jaw tightened. "The Vanthorns cannot afford witnesses." He pulled a long knife from his belt and pressed it into her hands. "The blade is silver-edged. It will wound even a shifted wolf. Use it if you must." Before Elowen could respond, a howl of pain erupted from outside. "One of the guards," she thought. Then silence. Brennan's eyes flickered amber, his wolf rising to the surface. "Stay hidden. Whatever happens, do not come out until you hear my voice. Or the king's." But he was already gone, his body exploding into wolf form as he crashed through the ruined window to join the battle. Elowen stood frozen in her destroyed cottage, the silver knife clutched in her trembling hands. Through the shattered glass, she could see shapes moving in the darkness. Wolves clashing with wolves. The flash of blades. The sickening sound of flesh meeting steel. Her mark burned with renewed intensity, and she gasped at the sensation that accompanied it. He was closer now. Much closer. The bond between them pulsed with desperate urgency, and for the first time, Elowen understood that she could feel his emotions bleeding through. Rage, so vast it threatened to consume everything. Fear, sharp and unfamiliar. And beneath it all, a longing so profound it made her eyes sting with tears. Through the window, she watched in horror as Brennan's wolf form was thrown against an oak tree with bone-cracking force. He struggled to rise, blood matting his silver-streaked fur, but 3 dark wolves circled him with predatory patience. He was losing. Elowen's gaze dropped to the cellar door. She could hide as Brennan had instructed, could wait in the darkness and pray that help arrived before the assassins found her. But Brennan would be dead by then. The guards were already silent. And she would be cowering underground while wolves died to protect her. No. She had spent 3 months running, 3 months hiding. 3 months letting fear dictate her every choice. Not anymore. Elowen dropped the silver knife and pressed her palms together. The power she had kept suppressed since childhood stirred in her chest. She had always been told to hide this gift, had always been warned that healing magic in someone of common blood would mark her as unnatural, as something to be destroyed. But she was already marked for death. What did she have left to lose? The golden light bloomed between her hands, warm and pure and ancient. Elowen stepped through the shattered window into the chaos of battle. The effect was immediate. Every wolf in the clearing turned to stare at the pregnant woman who glowed like a fallen star. The assassin wolves hesitated, their formation breaking as instinct warred with training. Elowen walked toward Brennan's fallen form, her bare feet leaving prints of light in the blood-stained snow. "You will not have him," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that were not entirely human. "You will not have any of them." She knelt beside Brennan and pressed her glowing hands to his wounds. The beta gasped as healing energy poured into his broken body, knitting bone and closing gashes with impossible speed. One of the assassin wolves lunged toward her with jaws wide. The golden light around her flared like a sunrise. The wolf was thrown backward with a yelp of pain, its dark fur smoking where the light had touched it. It scrambled to its feet and fled into the forest, followed by 2 of its packmates. But not all of them ran. The masked figure stepped into the clearing, crossbow raised. Unlike the wolves, this assassin was fully human, unaffected by the magic that had scattered the others. Impressive, a female voice said from behind the wolf skull mask. The Van Thorns will be very interested to learn that the king's whore is a witch. Elowen's power flickered. The healing she had poured into Brennan had cost her more than she realized, and her reserves were dangerously low. The assassin's finger tightened on the trigger. And then the forest exploded. Trees splintered like kindling as something massive crashed through the undergrowth. The ground shook with the force of its approach. The remaining assassin wolves scattered in pure terror. The masked woman spun toward the sound, her crossbow swinging to track the new threat. She was not fast enough. A wolf the size of a warhorse burst from the tree line, its fur black as midnight, its eyes blazing with golden fire. It moved with a speed that defied physics, crossing the clearing in a single bound. Its jaws closed around the assassin's crossbow arm with a sickening crunch. The woman's scream was cut short as the massive wolf shook her like a rag doll, then flung her broken body into the darkness. It turned in a circle, searching for more threats, finding none. Then those burning golden eyes fixed on Elowen. She could not move, could not breathe, could only stare at the creature that radiated power like heat from a bonfire. The wolf approached her slowly, each step deliberate. Blood dripped from its muzzle. Its massive body blocked out the moonlight. And yet, when it finally stood before her, it lowered its great head and pressed its nose gently to her belly. The baby kicked, both sides at once, as if two small bodies were responding to their father's presence. The wolf made a sound that was almost a whimper. "Theron," Elowen whispered. The shift happened in the space between heartbeats. One moment, a wolf stood before her. The next, a man knelt in the blood-soaked snow, his hands hovering over her stomach as if he was afraid to touch her. He looked up, and Elowen saw that the Alpha King was weeping. Elowen had imagined this moment 1,000 times during her months of exile. She had imagined rage, imagined cold indifference, imagined him dragging her back to Valdrin in chains to face punishment for her disappearance. She had never imagined him on his knees before her, tears streaming down his face, his entire body trembling with barely contained emotion. "You are alive," Theron breathed. His voice was raw, broken, as if he had been screaming for months. "You are alive. And you are." His eyes dropped to her swollen belly. His hand reached toward it, then stopped, hovering inches from her dress. "May I?" he asked. The question shattered something in Elowen's chest. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms, was asking permission to touch his own child. She took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. The baby kicked immediately, movements coming from 2 different places. Theron's eyes widened at the sensation, his palm flattening against her belly to feel more. "A child," he whispered. "Our child. Elowen, why did you not tell me?" The question broke the spell. Elowen stepped backward, pulling away from his touch. The warmth of the moment dissolved into the cold reality of everything that had happened. "Tell you?" Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "When would I have done that, Theron? Before or after you chose Lysara in front of the entire kingdom?" Theron flinched as if she had struck him. "I did not choose her. I would never." "I saw you." The words tore from her throat. "I was there. I watched you take her hand. I watched you stand before our people and declare that she would be your queen, while I hid in the shadows like some shameful secret." "Elowen, please." Theron rose to his feet, his hands reaching for her. "I was drugged. Brennan told you. The Van Thorns poisoned me. I remember nothing of that night except waking 3 days later and finding you gone." "How convenient," Elowen spat, even as her heart cracked at the agony in his eyes. "Convenient?" Theron's voice hardened. "You think any part of this has been convenient?" I have spent 3 months hunting for you. 3 months fighting my wolf for control. 3 months watching my kingdom crumble while I tore apart every village, every forest, every corner of the realm searching for the mate who vanished without a word. Because you rejected me. Because I was violated. The roar shook the clearing. The word hung between them, terrible and true. Do you think I chose this? Do you think I wanted to wake up bound to a woman I despise while the woman I love was gone? While our bond was screaming in my chest and I had no idea where you were, or if you were even alive? His voice cracked on the last word, and Elowen saw something in his eyes that she had never expected to see. Vulnerability. Raw, desperate vulnerability from the most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms. Elowen's anger faltered. The bond. She had felt it too. Every day of her exile. The burning mark that should have faded but never did. The ache that followed her into sleep and greeted her upon waking. The sense of him searching, always searching, like a distant lighthouse she could never quite reach. I thought you had thrown me away, she whispered. I thought everything you said was a lie, that I was just a convenient distraction until you were forced to choose someone worthy of your crown. Theron closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands cupped her face, tilting it up until she had no choice but to meet his gaze. You are worthy of everything, he said fiercely. You are my mate, my true mate. The bond recognized you before I even knew your name. Do you think I would give that up for politics? For power? For anything in this world or any other? A sob escaped Elowen's throat. She had held the grief inside for so long, had built walls around her broken heart to keep functioning. But now, with his hands on her face and his words cracking through her defenses, those walls were crumbling. I waited for you, she choked out. That night. I waited in my chamber for you to come to me. I was going to tell you about the baby. I had practiced the words 100 times. Theron's expression shattered. Elowen. And when you did not come, I went to find you. Instead, I found you choosing her, kissing her hand, looking at her like she was your future while I stood in the shadows with your child growing inside me. She pounded her fist against his chest, but there was no strength behind the blow. Do you know what that felt like? Theron caught her wrist and pressed her palm flat against his heart. Yes, he said quietly. I know exactly what it felt like. Because I have spent every moment since that night living with the knowledge that I failed you, that something was done to me that made me betray the most important person in my existence. His heartbeat thundered beneath her hand, strong and steady and achingly familiar. I have not touched Lysara, Theron continued. I have not even been in the same room as her since I regained my senses. The council is threatening rebellion. Half the noble houses have withdrawn their support. He laughed bitterly. They think I have gone mad, Elowen, and perhaps I have. But I would burn this kingdom to ashes before I let anyone but you sit beside me on that throne. The mark on her hip flared with heat, and she felt his answering pulse through the bond. His claim on her, incomplete as it was, resonated with something deep in her soul. The Vanthorns sent assassins, she heard herself say. They want me dead. Theron's eyes hardened to molten gold. Then the Vanthorns will learn what happens to those who threaten my mate. A rustle from the tree line interrupted them. Brennan stepped forward, his body still bearing the marks of battle despite Elowen's healing. My king, the beta said carefully. The assassin you dealt with was Serena Vanthorn, Lysara's younger sister. The name hung in the air like poison. Then there is no more pretense, Theron said grimly. The Vanthorns have openly attempted to murder the true queen of Valdren. This is war. His hand moved to her belly again, cradling the curve where his child grew. They tried to take everything from me, my mate, my heir, my very will. I will not allow them to threaten our family ever again. A howl rose from the forest, long and mournful. More followed, dozens of voices joining in a chorus that seemed to shake the very earth. "The king's wolves have arrived," Brennan said. "All of them." Eowyn looked past Theron to see shapes emerging from the darkness, wolves of every size and color filling the clearing, their eyes gleaming with fierce loyalty. "We go to Valdrin tonight," Theron announced. "Eowyn comes with us. The Vanthorns answer for their crimes before the full moon rises." Eowyn wanted to protest, wanted to argue that she was in no condition to travel, that the baby needed rest. But when Theron looked at her, his golden eyes soft with tenderness, she found she could not refuse him anything. "Together?" she asked quietly. Theron pressed his forehead to hers. "Always, my heart. From this moment until my last breath. Together." The journey to Valdrin should have taken 3 days. Theron's wolves made it in 1. Eowyn rode in front of the Alpha King on his massive black horse, his arm wrapped securely around her waist, his body shielding her from the biting wind. She had protested at first, but Theron had simply lifted her onto his saddle and silenced her objections with a look that brooked no argument. "My wolf needs you close," he had said, his voice rough with emotion. 3 months of separation nearly destroyed us both. I will not let you out of my sight until the bond is completed and every threat to your safety is eliminated." So Eowyn had relented, leaning back against his chest and feeling his heartbeat against her spine. The baby seemed to approve of the arrangement, settling into peaceful stillness for the first time in weeks. As they rode through the night, Theron told her everything. He told her about waking from the drugged haze to find Lysara in his chambers, attempting to consummate a union he had no memory of agreeing to. About the horror that had flooded through him when he realized what had been done. About throwing Lysara from his rooms and ordering her confined pending investigation. He told her about the search that had consumed every waking moment since. The wolves sent to every corner of the kingdom. The sleepless nights spent poring over maps and reports. The way his control had frayed with each passing day until his own advisors feared to be in the same room with him. "My wolf knew you were alive," he murmured against her hair. "The bond never fully broke. Every time I tried to accept that you might be gone forever, I would feel a pulse of warmth. And I knew. I knew you were out there somewhere, waiting for me to find you." Eowyn's hand moved to cover his where it rested on her belly. "I felt it too," she admitted. "The burn that never faded. The dreams that felt more real than waking." Theron stiffened behind her. "You dreamed of me? Every night. You came to my chamber. You spoke to me in words I could somehow understand. You told me you loved me, that you would find me, that nothing would keep us apart." "Those were not dreams." Theron's voice was hoarse. "My wolf, when I slept, he would reach for you through the bond. I thought I was only imagining it, but you actually felt—" He trailed off, overcome. Eowyn turned in the saddle to look at him. In the silver moonlight she could see the shadows under his eyes, the gauntness of his cheeks, the evidence of months of suffering etched into every line of his face. "We have both been through so much," she whispered, "apart when we should have been together." Theron's hand came up to cup her face. "Never again," he vowed. "Whatever comes next, we face it as one." He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tender and questioning. But when Eowyn's hand curled around the back of his neck, pulling him closer, something ignited between them. The bond roared to life. Eowyn gasped against his mouth as sensation flooded through her. His emotions crashed into hers with overwhelming force. Love, desperate and all-consuming. Desire, barely held in check. And beneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that wrapped around her like armor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Theron's eyes were blazing gold. "Soon," he promised, his voice rough with restrained need. "When you are safe, when our enemies are destroyed, I will complete the bond properly, and you will never doubt my devotion again." They reached the outskirts of Valdrin as dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. The capital city spread before them, its ancient spires reaching toward the heavens. But something was wrong. Smoke rose from several quarters of the city. The distant sound of shouting reached their ears. And on the great banner that flew above the castle gates, the royal crest had been replaced by the silver serpent of House Vanthorn. No, Brennan breathed. They would not dare. Theron's arm tightened around Alowan as a growl built in his chest. They have taken the castle. How is that possible? Alowan demanded. You have been gone barely a day. The Vanthorns have been planning this for months, perhaps years. They did not just want me to marry Lysara. They wanted to replace me entirely. A rider emerged from the city gates, galloping toward them at reckless speed. One of Theron's scouts, his face ashen with fear. My king, he gasped. The Vanthorns struck at midnight. They had allies within the guard. Lord Vanthorn has declared himself regent, claiming you have gone mad. Lady Lysara has been named queen. A snarl tore from Theron's throat. There is more. They have taken hostages. The servants who remained loyal to you. The guards who refused to bend the knee. They are to be executed at noon as traitors. All 37 of them. Alowan felt the blood drain from her face, including the old nurse who served in the royal chambers. The scout continued. The one who helped the Lady Alowan during her time at court. Marta. The name struck Alowan like a physical blow. Marta, who had brought her extra blankets when she was cold. Who had covered for her absences when she slipped away to meet Theron in secret. Who had suspected the truth and never breathed a word. We have to save them, Elowen said fiercely. Theron looked down at her. Elowen, you cannot enter that city. If the Vanthorns capture you. If we do nothing, 37 innocent people die. I will not have their blood on my hands, Theron. I will not let Marta die because she was kind to me. For a long moment the Alpha King was silent. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. Something fierce. Something proud. My queen, he murmured. Even now, you think of others before yourself. He turned to address the army of wolves assembled behind them. The Vanthorns believe they have won. They believe their treachery has succeeded, that their false queen sits secure upon a stolen throne. His eyes blazed with golden fire. They are wrong. A howl rose from the assembled wolves, hundreds of voices joining in a chorus of fury and loyalty. Today, we take back what is ours. Today, we show the traitors what happens to those who threaten our king, our true queen, and the heir she carries. The army surged forward, a tide of fur and fang and righteous rage. And at its head, with his mate held close against his heart, the Alpha King rode to reclaim his throne. The battle for Valdrin was brutal and brief. The Vanthorns had expected resistance. They had not expected an army of wolves driven by 3 months of rage and the primal need to protect their king's mate and unborn heir. Alowan watched from a protected position on the hillside as Theron led the charge. Even from this distance, she could feel his fury through the bond, a blazing inferno that scorched through her veins. His wolf form was terrible to behold, a shadow of death that tore through the Vanthorn defenders like parchment. Within an hour, the outer walls had fallen. Within 2, the castle gates lay in splinters. But as the sun climbed toward its noon peak, a messenger came running with news that turned Alowan's blood to ice. My lady, Lord Vanthorn has barricaded himself in the great hall with the hostages. He says if the king does not surrender himself, he will execute them all. Starting with the old nurse. Elowen was moving before she consciously decided to, ignoring the protests of the guards Theron had left to protect her. Her body ached from the journey, her back screaming with the strain of carrying the baby, but none of that mattered. She had to reach the great hall. The castle corridors were chaos. Bodies of fallen wolves littered the stone floors. The scent of blood hung thick in the air. But Elowen pushed through it all, following the pull of the bond toward where she knew Theron would be. She found him at the doors of the great hall, held back by Brennan and 3 other wolves. "You cannot go in there," Brennan was saying. "It is exactly what Vanthorn wants." "If I do nothing, innocent people die," Theron replied, his voice ragged. Elowen pushed through the guards. "Theron." He spun at the sound of her voice. "Elowen, what are you doing here? I told you to stay." "I know what you told me." She stopped before him, tilting her chin up defiantly. "And I am telling you that I will not hide while others die in my place. This is not your fight." "It became my fight the moment the Vanthorns decided I was an obstacle to their ambitions." Elowen placed her hand on his chest. "And it became my fight the moment I fell in love with you." Theron's breath caught. In all their months together, through all their whispered conversations and stolen moments, neither of them had ever spoken those words aloud. "Elowen," he whispered. "I love you," she repeated, stronger now. "I loved you when I thought you had betrayed me. I loved you through 3 months of exile and heartbreak. And I will not let that love make me a coward now." She turned toward the great hall doors before he could respond. "Lord Vanthorn," she called out. "I am Elowen, the woman your family has tried so hard to destroy. I am coming in. Alone." "Elowen, no." Theron grabbed her arm. She looked back at him. "Trust me, please." Something passed between them through the bond. Not words, but understanding. Faith. And beneath it all, a desperate prayer. Theron released her arm. Elowen pushed open the doors and stepped into the great hall. The scene inside was worse than she had imagined. 37 hostages knelt in a line before the raised dais, their hands bound, their faces pale with terror. Armed Vanthorn soldiers stood behind them with blades drawn. And on the throne that should have belonged to Theron sat Lord Aldrich Vanthorn, his silver hair gleaming in the torchlight. Beside him stood Lysara. "So this is the creature that has caused so much trouble," Lysara said, her lip curling with disdain. "A servant girl with a swollen belly. How pathetic." Elowen ignored her, her gaze finding Marta among the hostages. "Run, child," Marta whispered. "Run while you can." "I am done running." Elowen turned to face Lord Vanthorn. "You want the king to surrender. I am offering you something better." Vanthorn's eyebrow rose. "And what might that be?" "Me." Elowen placed her hand on her belly. "The king's mate and his unborn heir. Take me as your hostage instead. Release the others." "No!" The roar came from beyond the doors. Theron's anguish tore through the bond like shattered glass, but Vanthorn was smiling. "An interesting proposition. Very well, I accept." "Father, wait!" Lysara interjected. "We should simply kill her now." "Patience, daughter. A dead hostage has no value. A living one, especially one carrying the royal heir." Vanthorn's smile widened. "Guards, release the prisoners. Secure the girl." The hostages were cut free, stumbling toward the doors in confused relief. Marta tried to reach Elowen, but soldiers pushed her back with the others. As rough hands grabbed Elowen's arms, she felt strangely calm. The bond with Theron pulsed with his panic, his rage, his desperate need to reach her. But beneath all of that, she could feel something else. The baby, stirring within her. And with it, a power she had never felt before. The child was not just Theron's heir. The child was the product of a true mate bond, something that had not occurred in the royal bloodline for 5 generations. And that child, even unborn, carried magic of its own. Magic that was now awakening in response to the threat against its mother. Golden light began to emanate from Elowen's belly. Vanthorn's eyes widened. "What is this?" The light spread, flowing through her limbs. But unlike the healing magic she had used before, this was different. Wilder. More primal. This was the power of the wolf. Pain exploded through her body as bones began to shift. "No," she gasped, falling to her knees. "Not now. Please, not now." But the transformation would not be denied. 3 months of suppressed change, held back by her own fear and resistance, demanded release. The baby's awakening power had triggered what she had been fighting since the night Theron bit her. She was becoming a wolf. And she was doing it in the middle of an enemy stronghold, surrounded by soldiers who wanted her dead. The great hall doors exploded inward. Theron burst through in full wolf form, his massive black body hurtling toward her, even as her own body tore itself apart. His howl shook the rafters, a sound of pure anguish and protective fury. Van Thorn's soldiers rushed to intercept him. Lysara screamed orders. Chaos erupted on every side, and Elowen, caught in the agony of transformation, could only pray that she survived long enough to meet her mate on the other side. The pain was like nothing Elowen had ever experienced. Every bone in her body shattered and reformed. Every muscle tore and rebuilt itself. Her skin rippled and split as fur pushed through from beneath. She screamed, but the sound that emerged was no longer human. Through the haze of agony, she was aware of Theron fighting his way toward her. His massive wolf form scattered Van Thorn's soldiers like leaves in a storm. But he was not fast enough. Lord Van Thorn had drawn a blade, a sword that gleamed with an unnatural silver sheen. Wolfsbane-coated steel. "If I cannot have the throne," Van Thorn snarled, raising the blade over Elowen's convulsing body, "then neither will he." The sword descended, and stopped. Elowen's hand, no longer fully human, had caught the blade. Silver-white fur covered her fingers, and claws that had not existed moments before dug into the poisoned steel. The wolfsbane burned against her palm, but she held firm. "No," she growled, and her voice carried harmonics that resonated with ancient power. The transformation completed in a surge of golden light. Where a pregnant woman had knelt, a wolf now stood. Her fur was the color of moonlight on snow, her eyes blazing with amber fire. She was smaller than Theron's massive form, but no less magnificent. And she was angry. Elowen lunged. Her jaws closed around Van Thorn's sword arm with savage precision. The Lord screamed as bones crunched, the poisoned blade clattering to the floor. She shook him once, twice, then flung him aside. Across the hall, Lysara shrieked, "Kill her! Kill them both!" But the remaining Van Thorn soldiers were backing away. They had signed on to support a coup, not to face two enraged wolves of the royal bloodline. One by one, they dropped their weapons and fled. Theron reached her side, his black fur pressing against her white. Through the bond, she felt his overwhelming relief, his awe, his fierce pride. "You shifted," his voice echoed in her mind. "Elowen, you shifted." "I had motivation," she replied, surprised by how natural the mental communication felt. Theron's wolf made a sound that might have been a laugh. "My brave, impossible mate." Lysara had retrieved her father's fallen sword and was advancing toward them with murder in her eyes. "You ruined everything," Lysara hissed. "You were supposed to be nobody. Instead, you have destroyed my family, stolen my crown, and now you stand there in a form you do not deserve." Elowen shifted back to human, her body flowing through the change with surprising ease. She stood before her enemy, one hand resting on her belly where the baby still grew, miraculously unharmed. "I did not steal anything," Elowen said quietly. "The bond between Theron and me was forged by fate, not ambition. Your family tried to break it with poison and lies. All you accomplished was proving that true mates cannot be separated by the schemes of lesser wolves." Lysara screamed and charged. She never reached her target. Theron's jaws closed around her wrist, forcing her to drop the sword. He shifted back to human form, holding the struggling Lysara immobile while his wolves flooded the hall to secure the remaining Van Thorns. "Lysara of House Van Thorn," Theron announced, You and your family are charged with treason, attempted murder of the true queen, and conspiracy against the crown. You will face judgment before the assembled packs. You cannot do this, Lysera spat. You chose me, before the entire kingdom. I declared nothing. Theron's eyes blazed gold. A puppet drugged into compliance is not a king making choices. The choosing is void, it always was. Guards brought cloaks to cover them both. Theron wrapped Elowin in warm fabric with careful hands. Are you hurt? He asked quietly. Elowin paused, taking inventory. Her body felt different now. Stronger. More alive. The constant ache that had plagued her was gone, replaced by a thrumming vitality. I am well. Better than well. Theron's hand found her belly, and his eyes widened as he felt movement from two distinct places. The child? He breathed. Children, Elowin corrected softly. I think there may be two of them. The transformation, I think it actually helped. Their magic triggered the change. They saved us all. Theron made a choked sound and pulled her into his arms. Through the bond, she felt the walls he had built around his heart finally crumbling. I thought I had lost you, he whispered. When Vanthorn raised that sword, I know. Elowin pulled back to cup his face in her hands. But I am here. I am not going anywhere. Not ever again. Theron's eyes searched her face. The bond, he said hoarsely. It needs to be completed. Properly. If you will have me. Elowin thought of everything they had been through. The secret meetings. The whispered promises. The devastating betrayal that had not truly been a betrayal at all. The months of separation. The battle. And the blood. And the terrifying, glorious moment when she had embraced the wolf within. I will have you, she said. I have always been yours, Theron. From the moment we met. He kissed her then, in front of the assembled wolves and the defeated Vanthorns and the hostages who were weeping with relief. When they broke apart, Theron tilted his head, baring his throat to her in the ancient gesture of a wolf offering himself to his mate. Claim me, he said. Make it complete. Elowin understood instinctively what to do. Her wolf rose within her, guiding her movements as she pressed her lips to the spot where his neck met his shoulder. She felt his pulse thundering beneath her mouth. Her teeth sank into his flesh. The bond exploded between them. It was not pain. It was completion. Two halves of a single soul finally becoming whole. Elowin felt Theron's essence pour into her as hers flowed into him. Every memory, every emotion, every secret corner of their hearts laid bare to each other. She saw the night of the choosing through his eyes. Not the empty puppet she had witnessed from the shadows, but the horror of waking 3 days later with no memory of what he had done. She felt the desperation of his search, the way his wolf had howled in anguish every night, the slow descent toward madness as the days turned to weeks, and weeks to months with no sign of her. She felt his terror when he had seen Vanthorn raise that sword over her convulsing body. Felt the way his heart had stopped in his chest, the way his wolf had screamed with primal fury, driving him forward with strength he did not know he possessed. Felt the overwhelming relief when her transformation had completed and she had stood before him, magnificent and powerful and alive. She saw herself through his eyes. Not a nobody servant, but a woman of extraordinary courage and compassion. The healer who had captivated a king with her kindness and fierce spirit. The mother of his children, his fated mate, chosen by destiny itself. The most precious soul in his entire existence. And he saw himself through hers. Not a king who had failed her, but a man who had fought against impossible odds to find her. Who had torn his kingdom apart rather than accept a false mate. Who loved her with a ferocity that transcended poison and politics and even death itself. A man worthy of the love she had never stopped feeling, even in the darkest moments of her exile. When Elowyn finally released him, they were both trembling. "My queen," Theron breathed, pressing his forehead to hers. "My king," she answered. Around them, wolves began to howl, a celebration of victory, of justice, of a true mate bond finally, completely, eternally sealed. In the weeks that followed, the Van Thorns faced judgment before the assembled packs of Valdrin. Lord Aldrich was executed for his crimes, his final moments spent begging for a mercy he had never shown to others. Lysara was exiled to the frozen northern wastes, stripped of her name and her wolf, condemned to live out her days as the nothing she had once accused Elowyn of being. The kingdom healed slowly but surely. The crops that had withered under the weight of their alpha's suffering began to grow again. The wolves who had grown feral, driven mad by the broken bond between their king and his true mate, returned to their senses as the completed bond radiated peace and stability throughout the realm. The people of Valdrin celebrated their true queen with a joy that surprised Elowyn. She had expected suspicion, even hostility, from those who had witnessed the choosing and believed her an interloper. Instead, she found acceptance. The wolves could feel the truth of the bond between her and Theron. They could sense that this was what fate had always intended. And on a warm spring evening, as the sun set over Valdrin in shades of gold and rose, Elowyn gave birth to twins. A boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's healing gift. A girl with silver-white fur when she shifted and eyes that already gleamed with amber fire. Theron held his children with tears streaming down his face, his massive warrior's hands impossibly gentle. "Thank you," he whispered to Elowyn, who lay exhausted but radiant in their bed. "For fighting for us, for believing, even when I gave you every reason not to." Elowyn reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the claiming mark on his throat, the mark that matched the one on her hip. Both now healed into beautiful silver scars that proclaimed their bond to all who saw them. "I never stopped believing," she said softly. "Even in the darkest moments, something inside me knew. We were always meant to find our way back to each other." Theron leaned down to kiss her, their children nestled safely between them. "Always," he agreed, "in this life and every life that follows, you are my heart, Elowyn, my mate, my home." Outside their window, the wolves of Valdrin lifted their voices in a howl of joy. And in the great tapestry of the kingdom's history, a new chapter was woven. The story of a servant girl who became a queen, of an alpha king who tore apart his realm to find his true love, of a bond that could not be broken by poison or politics or even the cruelest twists of fate. They had found each other against all odds, and they would never be parted again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. A big thank you to everyone who is following. Your support truly means the world to me.